The term Southern Gothic refers to the intermingling of Gothic themes and imagery on one hand, with the setting of the southern part of the colonial United States, particularly Louisiana, with its rich historical association with the occult. The author Silvia Moreno Garcia has extended this genre even further to the south with her Mexican Gothic, and I hope it proceeds even further. At any rate, we're going to help ourselves to a bit of the Southern Gothic in today's adventure. Welcome to PhD&D, everyone. I'm Dr. Bowers, and today we're going to Souragne. That's the official pronunciation from the 1992 Ravenloft supplement, Night of the Walking Dead. I'm going to say Souragne and Marais de Tarascon. And as with all my Ravenloft videos, we're going to go over what this domain is, list some media to help us get an imaginative grip on the domain, and then sketch out an adventure. This adventure is going to take PCs from level 5 through level 7, that is, they will finish the adventure at level 7, and with DM's permission they could level up to 8 at the end. This adventure will adapt part of the aforementioned 1992 supplement Night of the Walking Dead, and it will also draw from Mythic Odysseys of Theros and a single card from the Descent into Avernus dice set. Before getting to all that though, what is the domain of Souragne? Well, in society, Anton Misroy presented himself as an upstanding gentleman, but within the walls of the prison over which he was warden, he was a sadist who believed righteousness was on his side. When his torturous punishments finally drove the prison's inmates to rise up, the bloody riot that ensued drew the attention of the dark powers. During the uprising, Misroy was drowned in the swamps surrounding the prison, but he rose again soon after, an undead warden in search of inmates. Beyond Misroy's prison, alligator-filled swamps cover the domain of Souragne right up to the sinking settlement of Port de Allure and Marais de Tarascon, a village where above-ground crypts outnumber the residences of the living. Okay, so Souragne is a Ravenloft domain associated with prisons and alligators. The Dark Lord is an undead prison warden, something like a zombie master or ghoul lord. Everywhere is a swamp, it's gray and constantly raining, and it's got two little doomed villages, one that is sinking into the swamp, and the other that is dwarfed by a gigantic graveyard, which presumably belches up zombies and ghouls and other undead horrors to terrorize the dwindling citizenry. It's great, it's pretty much what the setting was in 2nd edition, except with the addition of prisons, which I think is cool. Anyway, this domain involves a lot of things that I have fears of in real life, so this adventure was fun to run. And to help you get that same terrified, imaginative grip, let's go over some inspirational media. Now, there are a lot of terrible crocodile and alligator movies out there, and I don't want you to have to sift through all of them, so I did it instead, and I found 2 that are stellar. The first is the film Rogue from 2007. It's about a colossal crocodile who intentionally strands some Australian tourists on an island and then terrorizes them. And then there's the 2019 film Crawl. This is a good alligator horror movie. I don't think you can do better than this. We're going to draw from the spirit of these 2 movies, as well as Edgar Allan Poe's 1842 tale The Pit and the Pendulum, a story in which our ill-fated point-of-view character is trapped in the titular pit, tortured by rats as well as a device that involves the titular pendulum. Our version of Misroy's prison is basically going to be a sprawling vista of swampy torture chambers, and I think Poe's tale is particularly helpful. When it comes to the terrain of Souragne, I would borrow from the 2017 Crimson Court update for Darkest Dungeon. Look at the background of that setting. Look at the art, the architecture, the plants, and the animals. We want that aesthetic. We're also going to draw on the 2021 Merkborg release, Putrescence Regnant. This is a big ol' swamp crawl with a lot of interesting, gruesome encounters, and an emphasis on the undead and gators, which are supposed to be Souragne's thing. In terms of the Dark Lord, when it comes to Anton Misroy, or as we're going to call him, Warden Misroy, this adventure isn't going to have a direct encounter with him, although he's in it. If I did want a direct encounter with him in this adventure, I would start out with the Shire Reeve from 1991's Nothing But Trouble, the weird old ghoulish judge played by Dan Aykroyd, and his horrible ghastly murder house is pretty good. I would want to make things a lot more like 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre in terms of what's there, though. Have that sort of thing instead of the dumb jokes from Nothing But Trouble. And when it comes to what Anton Misroy talks like, I would think of Pappy O'Daniel from that early 2000s film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Take that character's voice. And finally, in terms of musical inspiration, I really recommend the song Silesian Fur Coat from the 2023 album Scopophobo Exoskelet by this band. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say it. I know that it translates as Sleepwalker. Please feel free to help me out in the comments. But this is a bit of atmospheric, lyricless black metal with a slide guitar. I found it pretty inspiring. Take a listen. It's on Bandcamp. And finally, of course, there's the 1992 second edition Ravenloft adventure, Night of the Walking Dead. This one's a classic. It's a mystery, followed by a cemetery crawl with a zombie fight at the end. We're going to remove the mystery part, although you're free to put it back in there. And speaking of which, let's lay out this adventure. In Act 1 at level 5, the PCs arrive in Souragne. They're already in the horrific prison of Anton Misroy, or Warden Misroy. The warden crackles taunts and insults from numerous loudspeakers festooning his prison. And as the PCs escape, we proceed to Act 2 at level 6. That's where the PCs arrive in Marais de Tarascon, and they discover that there is a map that they can use to escape this accursed swampy domain. The map is hidden in a cemetery, which is full of undead dangers. But once they brave those dangers and get the map, it's on to a swamp crawl to freedom for Act 3 at level 7. And that's the adventure. So let's go over this thing in detail. In Act 1 at level 5, the PCs begin by drowning. They are submerged in dark, murky water. Even if they can breathe underwater, they're still submerged in it. There's a giant crocodile in there with them, but don't call it that. Instead, describe the elongated, scaly shape in the gloom, churning the water with the weight of a city bus. The PCs can fight this thing or flee from it, but either way, as they swim, they end up separated, ultimately swimming upward to find themselves surfacing in different cages. Each cage is tall, narrow, about the dimensions of a phone booth, locked from the top with a padlock, and each one has a narrow ledge welded to the bars on the inside where a prisoner can stand or uncomfortably sit. None of the cages have a bottom, they're all open to swamp water. And as soon as the PCs find themselves here, they are trapped in Souragne. Investigation reveals that if they try to swim downward, the bars go on forever. There is no limit to them. The cages just go down forever. As the PCs investigate and discover this, they should look around and realize that they are in a swamp and there's a dozen other cages that hold not only themselves, but a bunch of other haggard, quivering NPCs. The NPCs warn the PCs to stay out of the water, stay away from the water as much as they can. Indeed, they probably interrupt or try to interrupt the PCs' explorations by saying this. As soon as the PCs begin conversing with one of the NPCs, an enormous alligator head surges up from the water inside of their cage, grabbing them, rending them, and dragging them screaming down below the surface. All of the other NPCs scream and shudder, and they cling to the bars of their cage and try to climb up them and stay away from the water. Now you might be wondering, wait a minute, if the bars go down forever, then where are the alligators coming from? And the answer is the dark powers. This place is a nightmare. Part of the nightmare involves being eaten by alligators. So yeah, the dark powers create the alligators to eat you. The NPCs say that there are crocodiles below, they're in every cage, and the only hope of survival is staying out of the water. Now the water pools around and in between the cages too. It's a swamp, and out of the swamp there juts a series of stone pillars with a stone walkway suspended from them. Hooked onto the sides of the pillars are speakers. Like loudspeakers, basically an intercom system. The nearest speaker crackles to life, and from it a harsh, scratchy voice welcomes them in a southern drawl to the prison of Warden Misroy. The warden admits ignorance and disinterest in whatever the PCs did to end up there. All he cares about is overseeing their just punishment, which is death by alligator. And as he says this, another alligator head surges up and eats another random NPC. Now, for a few moments up to an hour, the PCs are free to talk and strategize as NPC after NPC gets eaten by alligators. They have all their equipment and their abilities and everything, so there's a start. Now eventually, Warden Misroy's head henchman, Bubba, comes along. Bubba is a flesh golem with alligator skin. He looks like Killer Croc, except for he's an undead Frankenstein thing. Bubba's job is to feed the prisoners and to kill or detain any who attempt to escape. Since Warden Misroy doesn't really care about the former task, Bubba drags along a sack of fish guts from which he throws rotten handfuls at the PCs. Bubba also has a key ring which clanks noisily against the belt that is his only garment. Once Bubba is there, one of the options the PCs have is to knock him off of the stone walkway, take his key, unlock the tops of their cages, and escape. That's an option in case they can't free themselves in some other creative way. Now, once the PCs are free, they find themselves in a maze of elevated stone walkways, which oversee different parts of the prison. Rather than map out a whole maze, I would describe the various scenes that PCs encounter as they try to find their way out of it. I would have them make a series of ability checks. Investigation and survival seem pretty good here. And once they succeed on 3 high DC checks, they escape. After each check, however, they encounter something. And for the sake of richness and variety, that something is going to be a combination of results on 3 different tables. The first table is a combat table. You roll a d6 and see what the PCs encounter to fight. On a 1, it's 1d4 crocodiles. On a roll of 2, it's a giant crocodile. On a roll of 3, it's 2d4 sturges. On a roll of 4, it's a strigoi. And on a roll of 5, it's a chasmi. On a roll of 6, by the way, they don't encounter any monsters. That's a fortunate possibility. Statistically, I mentioned crocodiles, but remember, thematically, they're alligators. Remember also that this area is supposed to look like the Crimson Court from Darkest Dungeon, and we are leaning into the mosquitoes and the gators. So there's the D6 table: crocodiles, giant crocodiles, sturges, strigoi, chasmi, and nothing. In addition to that, however, we're also going to roll on a D6 table to see what the PCs find below the stone walkway, what's going on in the areas of the prison that they explore. On a roll of 1, there's a huge cage where a pair of alligators fight over human remains as another human being struggles to survive and evade the beasts. On a roll of 2, there's a large cage with human torsos on elevated platforms. The heads are still attached, and they're screaming. Their limbs have been severed, however, by a giant alligator that has snapped them off and is prowling along the floor. The poor victims were strapped to the platforms, and the platforms were just high enough where the alligator can't quite reach their heads or torsos, but could reach their limbs. On a roll of 3, there's a huge cage, and suspended from the top, inside, is a set of huge scales, like balance scales. A handful of prisoners jump back and forth between the 2 parts of the scale, trying not to let either part dip below too much, since a giant alligator waits greedily below. On a roll of 4, we basically have a giant cage with the pit and the pendulum, except for at the end of the pendulum is some poor victim, and they're swinging lower and lower towards a pit of alligators. On a roll of 5, it's the same thing, except for this time it's an alligator swinging back and forth, getting lower and lower to a group of people. And finally, on a roll of 6, there's just more cages like the ones that the PCs emerged in. So now we've got a random combat table, a random scenery table. Let's do a random interactive object table too. And here I'm going to take encounters from a card called Strange Encounters in Avernus from the D&D release of the Descent into Avernus themed dice. And we're going to take encounters 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12, 17, or nothing. On a roll of 1, there's just a giant 20-foot tall monolith of stone that has writhing faces with tortured expressions all over it. Encounter 3, it's a giant white gazebo 30 feet across and 15 feet high with a peaked top. Encounter 4 is a 15-foot wide by 15 foot high by 5 inches thick wall of flowing black liquid in which the PCs can see mirrored versions of themselves grinning fiendishly. Encounter 5 is a banquet table furnished with food and drink for royalty. It's all fresh and delicious, but each little morsel has a human face on it that cries out and begs not to be eaten. It's all otherwise normal, though. Encounter 6, it's great. It's a huge stone pedestal with a wrought iron lever on the top. If somebody pulls the lever, they just hear a faraway sound of machinery followed by someone screaming in agony. These are great. A lot of them are mysterious. They're not intended to directly and obviously tie into Souragne. They just give PCs more to ponder. Like Encounter 12, which is just a 30-foot pile of skulls of various humanoids. And Encounter 17, where you've got a wooden human doll, that is to say, a wooden doll representing a human, that cries silently. It sheds tears. If any PC picks up the doll, it animates, starts crying audibly, and follows the PC around until it is destroyed, or the character it's following dies. Those 7 creepy encounters, plus an 8th, which is nothing, constitute our interactive object table. So as the PCs make checks to navigate the prison, you roll on the combat table, you roll on the interesting scenery table, and you roll on the interactive object table. Those combinations will give you plenty of variety. And remember, there's always a loudspeaker nearby from which crackles Warden Misroy's voice, taunting the PCs and saying there's no escape. Now, once PCs succeed on a few checks to explore the prison and find their way out, They do. They reach the prison gates, they reach level 6, and we proceed to Act 2. Act 2 begins with the PCs seeing a village in the distance. It's a small swamp village, made to seem even smaller by the enormous ornate cemetery that dwarfs it all around. The cemetery features ornate Gothic tombs and crypts and elaborately carved headstones. Statues of angels weeping and 3D heraldry with griffins and swooning dragons. The village, comparatively, is very simple. Now, the villagers are friendly, but they also have a problem. Nobody in their village, or in the history of their village, constructed the cemetery around them. That ancient thing predates any record of civilization in Souragne. But despite not creating it, the citizenry of Marais de Tarascon, which is where the PCs are bedeviled by the undead inhabitants of the cemetery. Every night, undead monsters of all kinds arise from the cemetery and stalk through Marais de Tarascon. Their number is countless, there's no way to slay them all. So the villagers try to keep quiet and just hide behind bolted doors and windows. Now, when the villagers hear that the PCs escaped from Warden Misroy's prison, or when they hear that the PCs want to escape Souragne, they claim there is a map hidden in the cemetery. It's in one of the larger tombs, one of those larger buildings. If the PCs brave the tombs, they should be able to find the map and then use that map to escape Souragne. Oh, how the villagers would love to go too, but they could not possibly survive the dangers of the cemetery or the dangers of the swamp beyond the village. With the PCs, there's some hope, however. Nobody in the village knows exactly where the map is in the cemetery, unless you want to include some hints or clues or riddles or something. I would just turn it into a cemetery crawl. Use the cemetery on page 127 of Mythic Odysseys of Theros, the Cemetery of Atropos, or whatever it's called, and just let the PCs explore that. Populate the tombs with zombies, ghouls, swarms of zombie limbs, and a zombie clot. The zombie clot is a great big boss for PCs of this level. And once the PCs have explored enough, or once they explore the specific area where you put the map, they find the map. This means they level up to 7, and we proceed to Act 3. Now, Act 3 is a swamp crawl. We're going to adapt Putrescence Regnant for Merkborg, and we're going to say that the map that the PCs found is the map on the LP sleeve insert from Putrescence Regnant, the one that you're supposed to hand to the players. Now, Putrescence Regnant was sold initially with a vinyl LP, and while that may be hard to find, it's comparatively easier to find a PDF of Putrescence Regnant. I would just change the village of Traurich to Marais de Tarascon, but keep everything else the same. Keep the cannibalistic cult of the Mudmaster. Keep the immortal alligator-headed algae blights. Keep the floating basilica and the weird aristocratic priesthood. Things get strange towards the edge of the borders of Ravenloft. I would just replace the search for the king in Putrescence Regnant with a search for a portal that leads out of Souragne. You really don't need to change almost anything. That inverted tower place is really cool. Just make sure that you remove any references to Galgenbeck, references to Verhu and the other basilisks, all that Merkborg stuff. Remove those references unless for some reason you're taking your PCs to Merkborg land. But once the PCs crawl their way through the bog, and they find what in Putrescence Regnant's original release would have been that lost king, what they find instead is a misty portal leading out of Ravenloft, or at least out of Souragne. Where will it take them? Wherever it is, it's their next adventure. And that's our adventure in Souragne. What do you think? Do you like the alligator torture chamber motif? What about the zombie-ridden cemetery crawl? And do you, like me, think it's cool and fun to adapt Putrescence Regnant to 5th edition? Or would you do the other thing and run this whole Souragne Ravenloft adventure with Merkborg? Let me know in the comments. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to do all the internet things. Click like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon for new notifications about this channel. And thanks!